Okay, so you need 4 index cards. We're going to go through some things rather quickly. Remember, if you need to pause at any time to write down, do that. But please listen to the lesson because that's where you're getting what you need to know and the application aspects of this. So one of the things we've been talking about is elections. In the last part of elections and also with interest groups, it's kind of combined. This has to do with the interest groups and elections is campaigning and what modern campaigns mean and the impact of money in particular to the modern campaign. So first off, modern campaigns 5.26. All right, on the backside, flip over and you're going to draw a little T-chart. You're going to have benefits on the left, drawbacks of modern campaigns on the right. So benefits on the left, drawbacks on the right. Okay, modern campaigns, the benefits. One thing that is a benefit of modern campaigning is that we have a dependence on professional consultants. So there's people that deal with image, they are helping you fundraise and all kinds of different strategies when it comes to advertising and whatnot. And so this has made campaigning a much more professional business. And there are literally, as you can see below, I just Googled political campaigning and it came up with a couple different sites very quickly, one of which on the left-hand side has to do with mostly fundraising, and on the right-hand side, a group that helps progressive/liberal candidates win. And there are definitely all kinds of websites out there that help Republican and conservative candidates win. So professional consulting. Another thing that has happened in recent campaigning has been the advent and the use of social media for campaign communication and fundraising. So social media has been used for campaign communication and fundraising. As you see on the chart below, if you go back about 100 years, Calvin Coolidge became the first president to use radio. Eisenhower becomes the first candidate to use the television, and he actually had advertisement on television. So 1950, go Ike. 1960 was the first presidential debate that was advertised, and one of the things that came out of that was that Nixon looked like he was nervous and he was sweating. JFK was a good-looking guy, so that helped him supposedly. 1996 was the first campaign websites, and then 2008, President Obama used different social media. And then you see on the right-hand side, 2012 election was the first time that both major parties used Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. And you could see President Obama, like the advent of Twitter and YouTube, he really used it a lot more than Romney did. And that really helped him, and now you have on the flip side of that, a Republican, Donald Trump, who's using Twitter and YouTube and other things to micro-target candidates. But really it was Barack Obama who advented the whole micro-targeting. And you go on YouTube and you watch something and suddenly an ad pops up, and it was Obama campaign who really perfected that. But now the Trump campaign is attempting to perfect it as well. Drawbacks of modern campaign, without question, rising campaign costs. It costs a lot of money to micro-target people in all these different social media venues. As you can see on the chart below, that as vote totals may rise or fall, but spending on congressional campaigns continues to go up. So very clearly the Senate, millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, it continues to go up, and same in the House. Although it went down a little bit in 2014. 2018, though, was super expensive, which isn't on this chart. So rising campaign costs. Money keeps being spent more and more and more. And this leads to intensive fundraising efforts. Rising costs leads more fundraising. You can see that the chart here below, most of the time, whoever spends the most usually wins. And usually the person who spends the most is the incumbent because they have fundraising capabilities that a new person does not. So incumbents generally win. We already know that. And so they usually spend the most. Not always. Hillary Clinton outspent Donald Trump by a lot of money in 2016, and she lost. So it's not always, but pretty close. And lastly, modern campaigns have led to huge election cycles that are longer and longer and longer and longer. And this has led to voter burnout. Duration of election cycles is longer, and it leads to voter burnout, where people just turn off. They're so sick of campaigns that last forever. For example, we're still over a year from an election, and yet president candidates are all over the place running around looking to get elected. And you can see here in the chart below, when John F. Kennedy, go down to the bottom part, John F. Kennedy announced he was 300 days ahead of an election, which is less than a year. Like, so 1960, he actually announced his candidate in 1960, his candidacy in 1960. But you can see Bush, George W. Bush, 514 days he announced his candidacy in 1999 before an election. And Hillary Clinton announced in 2016, 576 days. In this year, this election cycle for 2020, the candidates were almost 600 days ahead. So we're almost 2 years ahead of a presidential election, and people are announcing their candidacy and are starting to run for a vote, look for votes. I mean, it's absolutely insane. Look on the left-hand side. So you can see almost 600 days for 2016. And then you go down here, first caucus in 2016, 281 days before the first caucus. Mexican law says only 147 days by law. UK, it's 139 in Canada. And then down at the bottom, which is, I think it's getting covered up right now, but Japan, by law in Japan, you only can start the campaign 12 days before the election. That's pretty wild. All right, so this is done with this card. So drawbacks and benefits. I would take a moment and study it before you move on. 5.27, political action committees. Political action committees. Pause it if I go too fast because I'm getting ready to go. In 3, 2, 1. Okay, these are called PACs. Matter of fact, that's pretty much all you'll call them after this. PACs, 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 PACs. All right, PACs. The purpose of a PAC is to raise and spend money to elect or defeat candidates. So some PACs mainly are trying to defeat someone, and other PACs are trying to elect. And they'd be doing both at the same time. But raising and spending money to elect or defeat candidates. Most PACs represent labor, so labor unions, business, corporations, and ideological interests. Pro-abortion, against abortion, anything, environment, whatever the environment causes, there's going to be an interest group, and the interest group has a PAC. Candidates, by the way, can also have a PAC, and you can give money to that PAC. Political Action Committee. A person, by law, so like you and I, can give up to $5,000 per election per candidate. However, we can also give $15,000 a year to a party. So we can give $5,000 per candidate per election. We can give $15,000 a year to a political party. And we can give $5,000 to a PAC each year. So those are numbers you need to know. $5,000 a candidate, $15,000 to a party, $5,000 to a PAC. So you could give, let's say Morgan Griffith is an example. He's our representative. You could give $5,000 to Morgan Griffith as a candidate, but you also could give $5,000 to the elect Morgan Griffith Political Action Committee as well. And if there's some other PAC that's out there that wants to support Morgan Griffith, you give $5,000 to them. So see, you could support Morgan Griffith with lots more money by giving all kinds of different PACs that are going to run ads on his behalf. Or you could give money to a PAC that's going to try to defeat his opponent. Plus, you could give $15,000 a year to his party, which is Republican Party. So you can give money all over the place. This is all regulated, by the way, by the Federal Election Commission, the FEC. More on that later. Super PAC. Now, there's a different thing. So you got PACs that raise money, all these different interests. Then you've got something called a super PAC. A super PAC is a super PAC because it can't give money to a candidate. It cannot coordinate anything with a candidate, but it can run ads. A super PAC can send mail, and it can support a candidate or try to defeat another candidate. Now, again, I'm going to make a point. A super PAC cannot coordinate efforts with a candidate. So like Morgan Griffith, if there's a super PAC out there, Morgan Griffith cannot communicate with them. He cannot coordinate. He cannot say, hey, I'd really love you to run an ad that says X. A super PAC does this completely independent of the candidate. And as a result of that, if a super PAC is completely independent, then it has no limits on spending. So let's say there was a super PAC that wanted to defeat Morgan Griffith. They could run ads against him in Southwest Virginia on WDBJ, whatever the stations are, and they could run that no limits whatsoever. But if a candidate coordinated with a super PAC, then they'd be in violation of federal election law, and that's like criminal. So super PAC, no connection to candidate, no limits. All PACs connected to the candidate, there are limits to how much you can give to them. you can only give $5,000 a year. Okay, cool. That's it for PACs. That's a lot. So you really need to stop for a second and just remember the numbers, what the purpose is, who's involved, and then what a super PAC versus a regular PAC are. Make sure you study that. Make sure you understand it. All right, 528. Hard money versus soft money. You've got to understand these concepts. This is so critical when you're understanding campaign finance laws. Okay, hard money versus soft money. Backside, you can make a chart, T-chart if you want, or just we're going to do a real quick definition of each. Hard money, first thing. Pause it if you need to. First off, hard money. Hard money is money or donations that's given directly to a candidate, and it's regulated by the Federal Election Commission or the FEC. Hard money, again, are donations given directly to a candidate and is regulated by the Federal Election Commission. Now, I'd make an arrow, or maybe you want to put it on the next line, however you want to do it. But just so you know, the Federal Election Commission is a federal agency, an independent federal agency, meaning that it's not part of another department. It was established in 1975 to enforce campaign finance laws. The campaign finance laws are the ones that set, like, you can give $5,000 to an individual. Like, I cannot give $1 million to a presidential candidate, because that seems like almost too much influence. Like, hey, I'll give $10 million to, candidate X. And so they put limits on that. And so $5,000 to a candidate, but you also can give to his PAC, and you also can give to her super PAC, or a super PAC that's connected to trying to defeat the opponent of that candidate. So you can give all kinds of money, but you only can give, the Federal Election Commission keeps track of all that. Awesome. That's hard money. So we know where it's going, and we know it's going to a candidate. Hard money, candidate. Hard money, candidate. Soft money. Soft money is money that's spent by a PAC in support or against a candidate. And that's usually really what we're talking about with a super PAC. Soft money. So I can give money to a super PAC, and they can spend away all they want. And so they can raise a lot more money than a candidate can, oftentimes. And a super PAC is often run by an interest group, some sort of interest group. All right, that's it for that. That's all you have to know. But hard money, just think candidate. Soft money, super PAC, that's going out and trying to defeat a candidate or against a candidate. If you look at this chart right here, on the right-hand side, look at this first part, Open Secrets, which keeps track of money spent on candidates. If you look at this in a campaign, look at the amount of spending, over $40 million spent by different outside spending by super PACs in 2018. You can see how it's really increased dramatically here in the last few years. So the amount of money spent by special interest groups on elections is pretty high. On the left-hand side, notice that the midterm elections generally stay around 40%. We know that. But in 2018, it went all the way up to almost 50%. Now, whether or not the spending in 2018 on the right-hand chart, where over $40 million was spent by interest groups to get people to vote or against candidates, or whether that's connected to the rise and increase in voter turnout, I don't know. Maybe just people were really interested in politics due to the age of Trump, or maybe all that money spent got people to get out and vote. Not really sure, but just notice a lot more money being spent by a lot more soft money being spent. There's also there too. Unlimited amounts of money can be spent, not regulated by the FEC. So soft money, that's another thing, not regulated by the FEC. I didn't mention that, but you got to write it down. Cool. If I'm going too fast, pause it, write what you got, and then continue. All right, last thing, 5.29, the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act of 2002, also known as BCRA. BCRA. You might even circle each letter, capital letter on the card to remember that it's called BCRA, Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act of 2002. Bipartisan, it was called that because Republican George Bush signed it, and lots of Republicans and Democrats signed this bill, supported this bill, and it passed overwhelmingly in 2002. And it was trying to reform campaign spending during an election. So flip over backside. It was an effort to ban soft money spent by corporations and labor unions. So remember, soft money is not regulated by the Federal Election Commission. And these are usually the money that's spent by corporations and labor unions is usually in the form of advertisements on the television or on YouTube now, and other places. And if you look, running up to 2002, soft money was increasing fairly rapidly. The gray is corporate spending, so special interest companies like Amazon or Microsoft or who knows, whatever business. And then the blue was labor unions. Notice labor unions has kind of gone up and it's kind of gone down a little bit because not as many people are in labor unions. And corporate spending, though, has increased dramatically here. Look at how many millions. I mean, it's unbelievable. Contributions, I mean, over $100 million in 2014. Okay, so they were trying to ban this. They also in the bill, they also wanted to reduce attack ads when you attack somebody, and they said that when candidates ran an ad, they had to have a stand by your ad provision, and that stand by your ad provision sounded like this: "I am blank, and I approve this message." So, like for example, down below, you'll see there's a screenshot of a President Obama ad, and it says down below, it says approved by the Barack Obama campaign, blah, blah, blah. So you had to say this in the ad: "I am blank and I approve this message." And by the way, this is still true today. Candidates have to say this. But if you're not part of the candidate campaign, then you're like a super PAC, then you would just say who the super PAC is. And the idea behind this was that citizens would know whether or not an ad was by a campaign or whether it was by a super PAC. It was to help you to kind of differentiate between that. And the debate on the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, the real debate was, does this law limit free speech by banning soft money? Like, don't I have the right as a citizen to spend money in support of my beliefs? And so that became the real crucial question: is did this bill violate free speech by limiting what people could spend on an election? And then that led to a big lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court. And we will have a lesson on that Supreme Court case. But the lesson on hard money, soft money, Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, and political action committees, this lesson is done. So I would take a moment and study these, okay, by yourself. And then you're going to take a millionaire that reviews this. You need to get the millionaire 100%. And then you need to screenshot it and send it back to me via Google Classroom. Thank you.